Hey everyone, welcome to the first video of 2018. Let's kick things off with the super awesome taro pudding cake. Let's begin with making the taro paste. I got a peeled taro from an Asian grocery store, and all I did was I sliced it, cut them into sticks, and then cut them into tiny cubes. Now you're going to steam the taro in a bowl for 40 minutes. After it's done steaming, you should be able to smash the taro with your fingers, so it should be like fork tender. If not, steam for another 20 minutes. Right after you steam the taro, add in 40 grams of white granulated sugar. Then use the back of a spoon to mash the taro. It's so easy to mash it because we steamed it, so right now it's really soft. Next, gradually add in 30 grams of heavy cream, add more or less depending on what kind of consistency you want. I like mine to have that creaminess and stickiness. And just keep on mashing until you don't see any more taro pieces. A few chunks are okay. Once you're done, set the finished taro paste aside and let's move on to the pudding jelly. First, in a mug, add in whole milk with 40 grams of sugar. Heat it up in the microwave for 30 seconds, just enough to melt the sugar. Next, crack 2 eggs in a 7-inch cake pan and whisk it lightly. We're going to steam the pudding in this cake pan, so make sure you're using a cake pan to make the pudding. Now slowly pour the warm milk into the beaten eggs and keep whisking as you go. Sift the egg mixture through a sieve and discard the leftover bits. Those leftover bits are the cooked eggs, so you don't want them in your pudding. Make sure your pudding is poured into a 7-inch cake pan like I just said, and now go ahead and steam the pudding for 20 minutes or until it is cooked through and looks shiny but still slightly jiggly in the center. After the pudding has cooled completely, scoop the pudding out onto a flat plate. Cover the plate with a plastic wrap and place it into the refrigerator until we need them. And finally, let's make the chiffon cake. Start by sifting 50 grams of cake flour for 3 to 4 times. Next, separate 3 eggs by moving the egg yolk from one shell to the other. You want to let the egg whites fall into a big bowl and put the egg yolks in a smaller bowl. Now set the 3 egg whites into the fridge because we want to make sure that the egg whites are cold. In the meantime, make the egg yolk batter. Whisk the egg yolks until they become a really pale yellow and thick color. Next, drizzle in 25 grams of oil and mix that in thoroughly. It should look very thick, kind of like mayonnaise. Now do the same for the 30 grams of milk, and lastly whisk in the sifted cake flour. Do not overmix the batter, just mix until you don't see any more bits of flour. I like to whisk my flour into the batter in a zigzag motion, that way it doesn't really overmix the batter. Now take the cold egg whites out of the fridge and start beating it with a mixer on low speed for 1 minute until you see large foamy bubbles. Here I have 45 grams of white granulated sugar, and you're going to add this in 3 parts. Right now adding 1/3 of the sugar. Continue beating it on low to medium speed for 3 minutes. Now the egg whites should have smaller bubbles and not foamy at all. Now adding the second part of the sugar and keep on beating. After another 3 minutes on medium to low speed, the egg whites should start to take on a droopy form. It also looks very fine in texture, no bubbles at all. Adding the remaining sugar and keep on beating. At this stage, you can beat from medium to high speed. And one tip here is that you want to make sure that you're beating in the same direction, like just beat it in like a clockwise direction or counterclockwise all throughout the process. After 5 minutes, you'll see the egg white starting to form a soft peak when you lift the beaters. Right now, both the peaks on the beater and in the bowl are very curvy. So beat for a final 4 minutes. Make sure when lifting the beaters, both peaks are standing up straight. It's okay if the peaks are slightly curvy. For chiffon cakes, we don't need soft peaks. We actually want stiff peaks because the stiffness of the egg whites is what's going to make our cake firm. And now just do one last check. Flip the bowl over and the egg whites should not fall. You'll know your egg whites are beaten successfully when it has a shine and gloss to it, and you can see the peaks look really nice. Now take 1/3 of the beaten egg whites and fold that into the egg yolk batter we set aside from earlier. Use the letter J motion for the folding technique to prevent the egg whites from deflating. Rotate the bowl as you are folding the batter. Fold until the egg whites are fully combined into the batter. Now just pour that into the remaining egg whites and finish folding. If your egg whites are beaten very nicely, you shouldn't have to worry too much about folding because basically the egg whites are going to keep their shape and they're not going to deflate at all. The resulting batter should look very velvety and thick. It should also look very glossy and you shouldn't see any more egg white. You can see that the batter still has retained its volume, meaning that it's very full of batter. This is the same cake pan I used for the pudding, so here's what I did. I made the pudding the day before making the cake so that I could take out the pudding and wash my cake pan. And just FYI, I also made the taro paste on the day I made the cake. So that's just a little planning that you can do. And finally, bake the cake at 320 degrees Fahrenheit for 1 full hour. Immediately after you take the cake out of the oven, bang it for a couple times on the counter and quickly flip it over onto a cooling rack or put the cake upside down on 2 mugs of the same height. Then just set it there for at least 3 hours. Next, to release the cake from the pan, pull the edges of the cake away from the pan. Don't worry because the structure of the cake is really sturdy. Pushing it won't deflate or ruin the cake. You'll see that the cake did not shrink at all, so it looks really pretty. Now you can just set it aside and let's move on to the last step. Whip up about 1 cup of heavy cream along with 1 tablespoon of sugar until you see stiff peaks. This is really a really easy process, so I don't think you need a lot of explanation. Now add a couple spoonfuls of the whipped cream into the taro paste to lighten up the mixture and make it creamier. Now let's assemble everything. Cut the cake into 3 layers with a serrated knife. Now I actually doubled the recipe, so I actually made 2 cakes because this recipe can only make 2 layers, so you probably want to double the recipe, meaning you want to use 6 eggs to make the cake so that you can get 3 layers out of it. Place 1 layer on a plate and spread out a scoop of taro paste with a knife. You can add as much as you want. I like to have a thick layer of filling. The taro paste should be easy to smooth out. If not, you want to add some milk or heavy cream. Next, place the second layer on top and spread the chilled pudding evenly across the cake. This is why we needed the 7-inch cake pan to make the pudding, because we need that size so that it can fit perfectly onto the cake. Now put the final layer on top and let's start decorating with the whipped cream. You want to do a light coating of the cream first. Just do it all around the cake as well as the sides, then go over the entire cake with more whipped cream to cover any exposing cake pieces. I didn't use any professional tools like an offset spatula or a turntable, so it goes to show how you can also decorate this cake with just a plate, a knife, and a piping bag. Smooth the whipped cream as best as you can, and then you're done. Now, because mine didn't look that pretty, I just piped some whipped cream using a piping bag and rose piping tip to decorate the edges. You can do that if you'd like. You could also add some fresh fruits right on top like I did. So the entire recipe and directions will be in the description below, so I hope you all enjoyed this video. Any questions or comments are welcomed. Put the cake in the fridge for 3 hours before serving so all the flavors and the textures come together. So there you go! Taro pudding birthday cake. It may not sound delicious, but you'll know how yummy this is when you try it, especially for you taro lovers out there. This is definitely not one of those dense and buttery cake. It's more of a fluffy, light, and airy cake. If you know and have tasted a chiffon cake, you know how good it is. But with the creamy taro paste, the jiggly pudding, and the sweet whipped cream, we're talking about the best homemade birthday cake.